how much does your culture and your employee engagement goals affect how your selection process? Either is it, the selection drive culture, which I would argue it does. But do you think about those two things together when you're selecting your next team members?
Yeah. So selection really does drive, culture. I do agree with that statement. I will also say, like, we historically know what works well for us, right? So we typically know the type of team member who will be successful and be happy. And so it's really like, again, getting to know your team, and then hiring towards that.
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, president of Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. And this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for all stakeholders. Today, we're going to explore employee engagement with my friend Rose Ann Garza. Rose Ann is the CHRO at the iconic Austin-based Kirby Lane Cafe, which has 10 locations in Austin, San Antonio, and Central Texas. And really, if you find yourself in Austin, go to Kirby Lane and get the Kirby queso. You'll thank me later. Rose Ann is also a longtime volunteer leader in Austin and across Texas. She is currently a SHRM Membership Advisory Council rep and the immediate past state director for Texas SHRM, the Cooperative Fellowship of Texas 30 SHRM chapters. She's also the recipient of the Austin Business Journal's HR Impact Award earlier this year. And finally, she's my very dear and patient friend. This is Rose Ann's second appearance on the podcast. She last joined us live from HR Southwest in 2023, exactly 100 episodes ago. Welcome back to Good Morning HR, Rose Ann.
Well, good morning, HR, and good morning, Mike. Thank you so much for having me.
So I've wanted to get you on the podcast for a long time. In fact, I've wanted to talk about this so long and some of the other stuff we're going to talk about that probably about 9 months ago, I said, why haven't we had you on the podcast yet? At which point you almost slapped me on the side of the head and said, dummy, I've already been on your podcast. And it's not that that was a forgettable one, but it was HR news and those kind of run together for me. But this is a deep dive into something I know you're really passionate about, this whole employee engagement process. And I know, even though y'all are hospitality primarily and, your food and beverage, I think the concepts that you've talked about when we've discussed this are transcendental to the industry. And I think so. I think even our folks and other kinds of operations are going to really get a lot out of this conversation. But in my career, 30 plus years in HR, employee engagement's gone from, getting an employee t-shirt, a company t-shirt or some swag on your anniversary, maybe your first anniversary, then we'll catch you in 5 years and you'll get a keychain or some crap, to having table tennis in the break room, or then pet insurance and that kind of stuff. And then just that kind of loose conversation about bring your whole self to work until it makes somebody else uncomfortable. Then don't do that anymore. So when you're talking about employee engagement, I guess two questions. How do you define it, and why does it matter to the business?
Well, for starters, I think that just like you, over my time, I mean, I've been at Kirby, next month will be 19 years, which is crazy. But even in that amount of time here, it has changed. And so I think one of the most important things about employee engagement is that, like, there is no one size fits all. And it really is about personalization, and it really is about asking the team what they want and listening to it and meeting them where they're at, not necessarily where you think they are. And I think for us, it means ensuring that they feel appreciated, safe, happy at work, and knowing at the end of the day, like, having a balance of it's still work, it's not play, right? So I think we have changed over the years too, and we've seen some of those biggest shifts for us within the last, like, 6 years.
And y'all are you're still a privately owned family business. And so, we have this idea that family owned businesses are businesses that are owned by individuals rather than, a bunch of shareholders or, investors. Uh, maybe that's easier for them, that, because we don't have to worry so much about profit. We don't worry about so much about, the bottom line. Those are the concepts out there. Uh, and certainly as somebody whose family owns my company, and I've got, payroll to make every week, and I've got margins to make, and my biggest investor, Mrs. Coffey, is certainly not going to take a loss on any given month. So I'm not sure that that's necessarily true, but do you think there's advantages for in employee engagement for smaller firms than there would be for larger firms? But y'all have 700 employees, so you're not exactly a small firm.
Yeah, so we're we're 800 team members now, and will continue to grow. And so I've done it both ways, right? I've done HR for a corporation for one of the largest restaurant groups in the world, and I've done it here, obviously, like family owned and operated. Both come with pluses and minuses. What I'll say about this is, whereas there's this idea that we don't have, what was, I feel like, what was the word you said? We don't have this board of directors, right? We can still put people first. And it's why I've stayed here as long as I've stayed, is we do put people first, but we are still a business, right? So you have to, the bottom line matters, margins matter. We've seen in our industry the cost of goods over the last several years have skyrocketed, and there's only so much that we can put back on a guest, right? Like there still has to be a value proposition. And so when you're looking at the dollars that you have to spend, those get smaller even if you get bigger sometimes. And so you want to make the impact of those dollars bigger as best as you can. And in my experience, the best way to do that is to listen to what they want and give them what they want. One of the biggest lessons that I learned about employee engagement is, you said at the top of the hour, we talked about pet insurance. We talked about these things that are nice to haves, but not necessarily need to have. And so much of our workforce really is concerned about, how am I going to pay my rent? That, a gym membership is great, but if you don't have a roof over your head, no one cares about that. And so really putting our dollars where they have their biggest impact was the biggest shift that we made. And our team felt listened to, appreciated, and it felt personal to them.
And while we're talking about finance, let's jump into that real quick, because one of the things that first time I was in y'all's headquarters, we were in your conference room, and and I realized you were using the Jack Stack's great game of business model, and you had it right up there on the wall. Everybody could see the top line numbers, and so describe. And one of these days I'm going to have you on just to do a whole hour and unpacking great game, but describe what the great game of business is, and how it affects how your employees connect to the company.
Yeah. So, great game of business is a concept that came out of manufacturing, and it really is talking about that you have open book management, and that your frontline team members can actually impact and do impact and have the biggest impact on your bottom line. And so, instead of being hidden about your costs, being transparent with them and having open book financials, and that's really what it is. In addition to that, as you start to play the game, which if you read that book or if you subscribe to that thought process, you're really teaching people to, in their everyday work, look for things and incremental changes that you can make in the business that will have financial, like positive financial impacts. And then you're playing things called mini games so that you can really like highlight and focus areas of impact. You're bonusing the team that has that biggest impact. It is a part of engagement for us, right? It ensures that they know, hey, here's where we stand financially, and it also keeps us honest. Here's what we're spending on things that you can't control, and here's where we can partner together to ensure that we have a financially sound and successful business, which in turn leads to a place for you to work, additional benefits, raises, things of that nature. And so it's really kind of like a whole pie. It's a 360 of they help us, we help them. One of my favorite stories about it, just to give people a real world example, because I'm saying a lot of words that people might be like, wait, what? What does that mean? When we first rolled this out, we went to the team and it was really overwhelming. And so we just took small pieces of this, and we created a financial literacy program where it's ultimately just modules that teach them how to do percentages, how to we really went back to like early day math and showed them this is how we determine what things cost, this is how our margins work, and this is how a P&L works. And so they go through a whole financial literacy training, which in itself has been incredibly successful for our team. And we've had so many team members tell us, hey, using what I learned here got me out of debt. Using what I got here helped me to pay off student loans. Using what I learned in the great game of business helped me to buy a home, to buy my first home. And so those are the like huge wins. Those are the wins that matter more than anything, is that we're positively impacting them outside of work. That being said, internally, after we went through this financial literacy program years ago and taught them how to do this, we then had team members coming to us and giving us things and saying, hey, you're wasting money here, you're wasting money there. And these were deep in the operational things that I don't know if we would have ever noticed them. And so it's, everybody's invested in the business, right? They care about the success both ways. And again, favorite story is about salsa, right? We're a restaurant, so we serve food. And one of our, Mike said this at the very beginning, one of our best selling appetizers is our queso. And our queso used to come, if you ordered chips and queso, you would also get salsa. We had a server come to us and say, hey, I am noticing that 9 times out of 10, nobody eats the salsa. And we were like, really? So we made a change at one location and just tried it. And all we did was say, when somebody ordered chips and queso, would you like salsa with that? And if they said yes, we brought it. And if they said no, we did not. And in the first year of us doing that, which at the time I believe we had 7 locations when we did that change, we saved $37,000 in the first year. And it was simply by asking a question. And that came from the team. It didn't come from us. I wouldn't have thought of that. And so that is really playing the game, is looking for these things and saving money and then investing that back in the business and investing that back in your team.
And that's just a really good example too of investing in your team, making, it improves their lives. And for the period that they're working for you, it improves their relationship to the organization and their ability to contribute to the organization's success. So let's talk about that period that they're working for you, because in in food and beverage, and hospitality in general, there's notoriously high turnover. People in your, a lot of your locations are in the immediate Austin area, so you've got probably, I'm guessing, a fair number of students. But I know from being there and seeing, you've got an eclectic staff, to say it mildly. And so I may remember somebody's particular look or something that's like, I know I've seen this guy here 3 times over the last, and I've been coming here forever. So what does turnover look like for you? And do you measure it as what's preventable and what's inevitable because there's a student moving on to something else or somebody who's really making a career of this? How have your engagement efforts affected that?
So to really give you the full picture of that, we've got to go back a few years. And so when I look, and I hate even doing the before and after the pandemic, right? But before the pandemic, we were seeing the worst turnover that we have ever experienced. And it was hard, and we were throwing everything at it. It's everyone's problem, and we need ideas from all aspects of the business, and how do we improve this, and what is wrong, and why are we seeing these turnover numbers? And just to give you some background for those of you that are not in hospitality or restaurants, industry average for restaurants and hospitality hovers right at about 150%. For Kirby Lane, historically, we were in like the 40s forever. We would fluctuate anywhere from like 38 to 45.
I know white collar firms that would love that number, really.
It was insane. It was great. And then a lot of things happened, right? So that was at the very beginning of my career here. And then a lot of things happened. We grew, which again, when you open a restaurant, anyone will tell you that you overhire and that you're figuring out the culture and the teamwork of that location. And so your first 18 months of a new restaurant, you expect probably about 150 to 200% turnover for a new restaurant. So we went through a period of growth. And so we were seeing that across the board, is that our turnover numbers just kept rising and rising, and we couldn't get a handle on it. And then very unfortunately, we had this thing called the pandemic happened, and that again, of course, very negatively impacted our team and our industry. And so coming out of that, I really had this opportunity to say, we're wiping the board. We're starting over fresh. We're figuring this out. We're going at this a completely different way. And one of the things that really that experience helped the entire executive team here was we were so good at convincing ourselves out of something, right? And so we were very risk averse. We were very we didn't want to try things. We were very like, no, we know that works. We can guarantee that works. Let's stick to what we know. And when, 2020 to 2023 really happened, it was everything. Let's try it all. And if you're going to fail, fail fast. Like learn from it as quick as humanly possible. Be as agile as humanly possible. And so that's really the approach that we took. And it started with, the team members that we unfortunately had to lay off. We just changed the way we communicated with them. We kept in touch. We offered them things throughout the entire time that they were not working for us. And then we had great success when we were open to the public and to feeding people in the building again. 88% of the people that we had unfortunately had to let go all came back. And so that was a huge, win for us because it also ensured the culture continued, the team member engagement continued. And then from there, we just started to build. And so I'm really proud that today, so in 2021, we were at 300% turnover. And I'm really proud that today in 2025, we are at 72%. And I know for many, many people, that's a bad number. But for our industry, for us, for where we came from, I'm really proud of that. And that's really the team that did that. That's really all those operators out there in the restaurants.
And I mean, it's got to be affecting you like it is so many other employers. I mean, just the labor market zeitgeist has changed, and the expectation that people are going to stay at a given job very long. That window is getting shorter and shorter as far as what people's expectations are. So I think if you're not an employer who's feeling that right now, and you've got very many employees at all, you're going to feel it just because, and it's true. I spend way too much time trying to understand the darkest side of the labor and employment world by staying on Reddit. And if you really want to see what the most dissatisfied, unhappy parts of the labor market are saying, Reddit's the place to go. You just have to, put on your armor and know that this is representative of a small percentage of the group. But there's this very strong sentiment, and you can see it in polls too. I mean, something like, I think there was a Gallup poll I think recently about, do you believe in capitalism? And for the responses, I think it was down around just below 50% of the respondents said that they supported capitalism. And so I think we're just also in an environment where the perception is that, the companies don't care for you, so why should you care for them? And that's again a reason why generally, if that maybe at some level it's a macro truth, but if you build your culture, you build, a place where people do feel heard, respected, appreciated, they may be the ones who are more likely not to go against that, grain and stay put. Um, Okay, I'll get off that soapbox. But let's talk generally about how much of employee engagement do you think is culture, like how we do things here, how we treat people, versus specific initiatives uh, that to make people, to help with engagement. Well, I'll let you describe any initiatives, but how much of it is just general culture and how we feel generally, and how much is it initiatives, or is that the cart before the horse? Is it the initiatives that really drive the culture?
So I'm going to say that these things they're married, right? So they go hand in hand, and it's like salt and pepper. If you're passing one, you're passing the other, right? They go together. And I think that, from my opinion, a decent bulk of it is how you treat your team. And then I'd say like 60-40, right? Be good to your people and then give them the benefits that show that they matter to you, right? So again, it's simple changes like yes, gym membership's nice, but if I'm not paying you enough to cover your rent, it does not matter. At the end of the day, none of these people are showing up every single day and working hard for us and putting up with the hard days because you gave them pizza, because you gave them a free t-shirt. That's not why they're showing up. They're showing up because they feel valued and appreciated. And I think what we're seeing in the workforce more than ever is appreciation and personalization matters. And so that's really the shift. And one of the benefits that we rolled out that was new and that was different and inventive was really we now give an allowance to everyone every week to take food home for their family. And so it used to be that only the days that you worked at the location that you worked, you got half off. If you were a tipped team member, if you were non-tipped, you ate for free. And you still have that benefit, but we added to that benefit. And we said, okay, what do we do? Well, we're in the restaurant industry. What do? We feed people. What is one of the hardest and biggest, when you get into that 5 or 6 o'clock hour, what is everyone asking? What's for dinner, right? And as a working parent, that is, I have no doubt, a headache every single day. And so, at least for one, if not two, if you can make that dollar stretch, we're taking care of dinner for you and for your family. And we also changed it to where it used to also only be that you yourself could get that benefit. And now we allow that benefit for your roommate. We allow that benefit for your spouse, your significant other, your partner, your children. And so it was really saying, okay, yes, we want you to bring your whole self to work. And here's how we take care of your whole self is the extension of those in your home.
And you use that term personalization, and there are probably team members who just don't use that, who,
Mm-hmm.
unless, maybe, uh, they're whoever they're going home to, if anybody, maybe they're not going to feed their cat Kirby Lane queso, although if you don't mind cleaning up the mess, I think the cat would be very happy for that. But they may not have that. So you're creating a benefit that that only some percentage of your employees will even have an interest in. So I'm guessing that's what you mean by personalization, or
Mm-hmm.
are there instances at a more micro level where leadership or store leadership or supervisor, somebody at that level are doing things at a specific employee level to improve engagement and meet them, as you say, where they are or what they need.
So I think that yes, there is personalization on like the micro level. We've modified the way that you do check-ins. We've modified how often and how soon you talk with leadership. We've modified how much we call it the RSC, which is the Restaurant Support Center, is physically in the locations. And so we've also created special interest groups that are based around, hey, I am an artist, or I love board games. Making them feel like, hey, we're creating community for you. And that's why so many people come to a restaurant. We talk all the time about a third place, right? If the listeners don't know what a third place is, your first place is your home, your second place is usually your job, and your third place for some people is the gym, is church, is your book club, whatever it might be. And so we're really trying to help these team members create community and create that third place within their workforce, within the people that they work with. That's also engagement, right? That helps them to say, you love Survivor? Okay, great. We've got a Survivor Fantasy League. Do you want to play Survivor
Mm.
Fantasy? You love a board game? Okay, once a month we have a board game night. Anybody and everybody's welcome to come. And so it's giving them those opportunities. And I think it also scratches a couple of itches, if I'm allowed to even say that anymore. I don't even know. But it
Well, right
helps.
now, I think the reason that she paused is because Roseanne happens to know that I am covered from head to toe in poison ivy right now for
Yeah.
about the last 10 days. And we were together some this week, and she saw what a leprosy patient I kind of look like right now. So,
Well, and I was trying to
so
avoid the word to not
yeah,
remind you, but here we are.
yeah.
Sorry.
I need somebody to scratch my belly now. Okay.
Oh no, no, no. Uh, No, I've lost all train of thought. Thanks, great. But it's really making sure that they know and understand that work is a safe place for them, and that we appreciate them and support them, and that we're always willing to listen and to change. And even though as we've grown, it doesn't mean that we are sedentary. It doesn't mean that we can't move forward. It doesn't mean that we can't modify who we are and change who we are. And again, that's a people first approach.
And let's take a quick break. This is normally the point in the podcast where I share a brief commercial about Imperative. However, given all that's happened in the news over the last couple weeks, I want to recommend a prior episode of the podcast, episode 112, where I talked to Monica Guzmán, author of I Never Thought of It That Way. Monica's clear and thoughtful insight into the value of curiosity and conversation when we encounter ideas with which we disagree, even strongly disagree, are especially relevant right now. Again, it was episode 112, and I'll include a link to it in the show notes. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 1/2 hour of recertification credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Research Credits. Then select episode 219 and enter the keyword queso. That's QUESO. And if you're looking for even more recertification credit, check out the webinars page at imperativeinfo.com. And now back to my conversation with Rose Ann Garza. So where are you sourcing the data to determine what your next initiative might be?
A lot of times the team, right? So another thing that I changed was I do a thing called HR office hours. And so I make a schedule and I physically go out to the locations, and I've got a list of things. It's like, hey, I'm going to be at this location on this day from this time to this time. And that's published, and they know that. And I give a laundry list of things that they can come and ask about or chat about. And so that's everything, yes, from your benefits, your concerns, your questions, but it's also like, hey, I love my dog. I'm a dog owner. I am a person who loves Survivor. Who knew I was going to be giving so many shout outs to Survivor on this podcast? It starts on Wednesday. This is why it's on my mind. But it also
I'm
is
more
like,
of a Love Island guy myself.
I can't open that Pandora's box. But I love the theater. I love musicals, right? So it's also getting to know like the team. Like, I want to know you. I want you to know me. I'm not a scary person that only fires people. Like, that is not what I exist to do. I exist to support them, to create programs that support them, and to ensure that we continue as a business and a successful one.
So you're talking about Survivor and pets groups. I mean, so really what you're talking about are a different kind of affinity group than we think about. We think about affinity groups focused primarily on marginalized groups, right? And that's the way, the pop culture, at least, and corporate culture thinks about it. But you're creating, if I can use the term, I don't know if y'all use the term affinity group for that, but these kind of special interest groups that are specific to what your employees are interested in. And then it doesn't sound like, other than some time, a ton of investment and expense on the company side to make this happen. So how much company, once somebody says, I want to start a, Buffy the Vampire Slayer group, again, I'm showing my age, but how many, what happens then? How much involvement is there from your corporate function?
So it's part of our onboarding, actually. So we get some of this information in the very beginning of what are some of the things that you love individually, like as a person. Do you have a hobby? Do you have a skill? Are you creative? If you are creative, what avenue of creative are you? Are you an artist? Are you a musician? Are you an actor? I'm in Austin, so we have majority of our restaurants are in Austin, and a lot of our team are, creatives. And so we want to be supportive of them. And so we We focus that in onboarding. We do that in check-ins. We try to get them involved and engaged. We have mentorship programs, so there's a little bit of that in there as well. Now, does every single person, are they involved in that? No. I mean, can they be? Probably not. We've got students, we've got single parents, we've got, they have multiple jobs. We have team members who work two jobs. And so it's really about who can and who wants to. We usually require that you have at least, three people to start a group. And again, it did really, it was funny that you brought up affinity groups, because that's kind of what this like is an offshoot of, like you said, and we call them special interest groups, but that's really where the idea came from. Was why not? Why does it have to only be that? And it doesn't, right? It can be these special interests, and it can be building community, and it can be building relationships and friendships. That's not a bad thing, right? Like, we're in a world where majority of people spend their time on their phone, on social media, where we have so many people, specifically for us, entering the workforce, who were doing school remotely for a large portion of their, education. This is teaching them skills. This is creating communication. This is person to person contact. And I think we could all use a little bit more of that.
And you mentioned, it triggered me. You mentioned communication and some of the skills that the emerging workforce is lacking or is challenged in. I'm chair of the talent committee for the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce, and we just did a big survey of businesses in Fort Worth, both at the C-suite and HR. And almost universally, the skill set that they need most are not degrees or certification requirements or even competencies related to the ability to do the job. They're what we always call soft skills. We're calling them power skills, or people skills. And then we're hearing from businesses definitely that the emerging workforce is missing that, but we're also hearing that our mid-level management is largely missing that, and so it's not just those damn Gen Zers. It's across the board. How much of your employee engagement and your culture uh, do you think is affected by how you select, or how much does your culture and your employee engagement goals affect how your selection process? Either is it, the selection drive culture, which I would argue it does, but do you think about those two things together when you're selecting your next team members?
Yeah. So selection really does drive, culture. I do agree with that statement. I will also say, like, we historically know what works well for us, right? So we typically know the type of team member who will be successful and be happy. And so it's really like, again, getting to know your team, and then hiring towards that. It's funny because we have so many of the same types of people at each location, but we don't do referral programs, right? Like, we don't. They have historically not been very successful for us, and so we moved away from that as an organization. Yet we're still, like calls to like, if that makes sense. And so I think that in itself has helped us. And we're a very established brand, so I just want to be clear. We're 45 years into business. This is our 45th year, and so these things took time. I don't want anyone that's listening to think all of this stuff happened overnight. It didn't. If you had talked to me 6 or 7 years ago, I would have had a completely different story, and I would have thought that probably looked like success. I'm really proud of where we are today, but if I think about the next 5 years, I know it will change again, and that I'll look at some of this stuff and think, well, that was okay, but this is better. And that's what we do as people. That's what we do as organizations. That's what we should do as HR leaders, is evolve, right? Just because we did it one way forever doesn't mean we do it that way always. And that's one of the things that concerns me the most in any business, is people who aren't willing to change and grow. You talked about these soft skills that Gen Z needs and that sort of stuff. It's so funny. I have never been a person who subscribes to each generation. Every generation that enters the workforce is the worst, right? Like,
Right.
this is what we hear. This is what they want us to believe. There's articles, there's headlines, podcasts about it, all the things. I don't subscribe to that, right? Like, I was once the worst, generation to enter the workforce too, according to XYZ. And I really, really think that like people are great and inherently good, and it's our job to bring out the good in them and to make sure that they feel like they've got a place where they can be successful. And we are not for everyone, and every job is not for everyone. That's okay. You don't have to. I have those conversations too. How can I help you to be successful somewhere else? Right? Like what are you passionate about? Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? So don't be afraid of that either.
So we're up on time and we could go on forever, but I want to make sure that we get this last piece of Rose Ann Garza wisdom, this last little nugget. So if there's somebody out there who's listening, they're in their HR function or they're in leadership in their organization, because we do have a lot of entrepreneurs who listen to this. Um, what would if I really know that we've got turnover issues. I can sense that we've got lower engagement, that the employees are coming for the paycheck and they're checking out at the end of the day, and they're doing just enough not to get fired. What would you suggest the first thing that or the first couple steps that an organization take to really begin to improve employee engagement?
I would say at least clear a week or two off your calendar, get rid of some meetings, step away from the computer and get face to face with people and get in the trenches with them. One of the things that I still try to do all this many years in is I still try once or twice a year to take a week and physically just work in the locations. So that's me washing dishes. That's me waiting tables. That's me cooking your food poorly and usually get sent back, which is joking. But get out there, like do the work, step away from the meeting, step away from the computer and talk to your people and build trust, right? Like I think that that's so important. And again, that's a thing that historically in the restaurant industry, we always talked about like, we're a family, we're a family, we're a family. And then everything happened that happened in the pandemic. And unfortunately, like we had to be a business first, right? And so we really were able to reframe that and help people know and understand. But it did take rebuilding trust because people lost trust in who we are and who we were. And so I think that you've got to have trust. You've got to get out there and talk to your people. Start there.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you again for joining me today, Roseanne. I really appreciate it. It's always good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please write us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're listening. And then share this episode on your favorite social media platform. Tag us, tag me. It helps us reach more listeners, and it strokes my ego a little bit, so I like that. And we'd love to hear your thoughts at goodmorninghr.com. Good Morning HR is produced by Marianne Hernandez and Paco Corral on Imperative's marketing team. The Good Morning HR theme music was created by Steve Pegler at HR Strategies of Texas. And I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week, and until then, be well, do good, and keep your chin up.